A week had passed since the Super Bowl loss, but for Travis Kelce, the weight of defeat hadn't lifted. The interviews were done, the cameras had moved on, but deep down, something still didn't feel right. Then, out of nowhere, his phone buzzed. It was Andy Reid. "Meet me at the stadium," the message read. No explanation, no context. Just a request Kelce couldn't ignore. What happened in that quiet, empty stadium that night would change the way he saw everything. And when the truth came out, it left everyone speechless. A week had passed since the Super Bowl, but for Travis Kelce, the sting of defeat hadn't faded. The interviews were over, the headlines had moved on, but something inside him still felt unfinished. He had replayed the game in his mind 1,000 times. Every missed opportunity, every moment where things could have gone differently. He had barely slept, and even when he did, his dreams were filled with echoes of the final whistle. Then his phone buzzed. It was a message from Andy Reid. "Meet me at the stadium." No explanation, no context, just a request he couldn't ignore. The stadium was empty when Kelce arrived. The cold air carried a sharp stillness, the kind that settled in places once filled with roaring energy. He walked through the tunnel, the sound of his own footsteps amplifying the silence. Then, at the edge of the field, he saw him, Coach Reid, standing with his hands in his pockets, gazing at the end zone. "You actually showed up," Reid said, turning slightly. His voice was calm, but there was something else in it, something knowing. Kelce let out a small breath and nodded. Didn't really have anything better to do. Reid smirked and motioned for him to walk. They strolled toward the 50-yard line, their shadows stretching under the stadium lights. "You know," Reid started, "I've been coaching a long time, seen some of the greatest players come and go. And you want to know the one thing they all have in common?" Kelce glanced at him. "What?" "They hate losing more than they love winning." Kelce let the words sit between them. "Yeah," he muttered. "That sounds about right." Reid stopped and turned to face him. "I get it, Trav. This loss, it cuts deep. But I need to ask you something. What exactly are you holding on to?" Kelce clenched his jaw. He knew the answer, but saying it out loud felt like admitting weakness. "I don't know," he finally said. "Maybe the feeling that I let everyone down. The fans, the team, you." Reid let out a quiet chuckle. "You think you let me down?" Kelce didn't answer. Reid took a deep breath and looked toward the stands. "You know, I almost walked away from this game once." Kelce frowned. "Come on, Coach, you?" Reid nodded. "Yeah, after one of the toughest losses of my career. The criticism was brutal. I started thinking, maybe I wasn't the right guy for this anymore. Maybe I had taken my team as far as I could." Kelce studied him, surprised. Reid had always been a rock, steady, unwavering. He had never heard him talk like this before. "But then," Reid continued, "someone reminded me why I started coaching in the first place." Kelce furrowed his brow. "Who?" Reid turned to him with a small smile. "A player. A young guy who believed in me even when I wasn't sure I believed in myself." The realization hit Kelce like a punch to the gut. He swallowed hard. "You're talking about me, aren't you?" Reid didn't say anything, just let the silence speak for itself. Kelce exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. He thought about the young guys in the locker room, the rookies who looked up to him the same way he had once looked up to Reid. The way they watched him, studying his every move, learning from the way he carried himself. Not just in victory, but in moments like this. "This isn't just about you, Trav," Reid finally said. "You may not realize it now, but the way you handle this loss, It's going to shape the guys coming up behind you." Kelce nodded slowly. He had been so caught up in his own disappointment that he hadn't thought about the bigger picture. Football wasn't just about the wins and losses. It was about legacy. Reid placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now, let me ask you again. Do you still believe in yourself?" Kelce took a moment before answering. The pain of the loss was still there, but something else was creeping in. A fire that had been dimmed but never fully extinguished. "Yeah," he said quietly, then louder. "Yeah, I do." Reid smiled. "Then that's all that matters." They stood there for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling. Then Reid clapped him on the back. "All right, big guy. Let's get out of here before someone thinks we're planning a comeback play at midnight." Kelce chuckled, the first real laugh he had let out in days. As they walked back through the tunnel, he felt lighter. The loss still hurt, but it no longer felt like an ending. It felt like fuel. Because Andy Reid was right. This wasn't just about one game. It was about every moment that came after it. And next time, when they got back to this stage, they wouldn't just show up. They'd finish the job. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what's the toughest loss you've ever had to bounce back from? Let's talk.